Hi guys, welcome back. So if you've been following movie news or awards season, you would know one of the most talked about movies recently is Netflix's Emilia Perez, and not necessarily for good reasons. So Emilia Perez has been going on a tear on the award circuit. It won multiple Golden Globe Awards. It has 13 nominations at the Academy Awards. It's currently the frontrunner for Best Picture, and yet it is one of the most poorly received Oscar nominees of all time. There's such a major disconnect here between award voters and the general audiences to a level that's pretty much never been seen before. Even looking back at past controversial winners like Green Book or Crash, there's not ever been this much hate directed at a single movie, and that's pretty much been the main talking point of this award season is how is Emilia Perez doing so good when pretty much everyone seems to dislike it, outside of course of the people voting it into these award shows. So after seeing so much online discussion, I wanted to sit down and see if the movie was really as bad as everyone said it was. So sat down, turned on Netflix, turned on the movie, and wanted to answer my question, is Emilia Perez really that bad? But the answer to that question is a little bit more complicated than simple yes or no. So my overall thoughts on the movie, to be as simple as possible, it's below average. It's meh. Emilia Perez is definitely not the worst movie I have ever seen in my life. I've seen movies that are way worse than this. There's actually some, competent scenes in this. The premise of a cartel leader transitioning and having to grapple with that seemed honestly kind of interesting to me, and at first it is pretty interesting. But the main flaw of the movie is really that it's boring. You can tell the director, Jacques Audiard, is really going for big swings here, and at some level that's admirable, trying to present something new and audacious, but really none of those really work out for the most part. And yeah, like I said, the movie is mainly just a slog to get through, especially after the first 30 to 45 minutes until the last 15 minutes. It is such a slog. I was continually checking the time and how much was left in the movie, and to me that is the worst thing a movie can do, because that means I'm not engaged in the story and I just want it to be over with. It felt like a chore watching this, and that is definitely not what you want out of your movie. There's almost kind of a reverse hype letdown to this, because I was kind of preparing to see one of the worst movies of all time, an offense to cinema, but really it was just a tedious experience. I'm never really going to watch it again. I think I gave the movie 2 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, which obviously that is not something that is, in my opinion, worthy of 13 Academy Award nominations. But I also don't think it is this ultimate terrible film that social media would have you believe. Emilia Perez herself as a character is pretty underbaked. I'm going to kind of go into spoiler territory here, so if you are intending to watch the movie for yourself and form your own opinion, I would go and watch that before listening to the rest of my thoughts on it. But the main problem with Emilia Perez, the character, and subsequently the movie, is that most of the transition of Emilia Perez is left off camera. We were first presented with her when she still identifies as a male. She is a psychotic cartel leader. She's a dangerous person. And then she has her surgery and cuts to 4 years later, and she is a totally different person. She's all of a sudden kind and generous. So all that character development from this one person to the new person is completely left off screen. And to me, that was the interesting part of the premise, is seeing the dynamic of who this ruthless cartel leader transitioning into a woman, seeing the actual character development happen. There is no character development. We're presented with one person, and they completely change. And we don't get to see why, how, the psychological effects of that. It's just, a time skip 4 years later. And this represents a whole bigger problem in the movie, but I'm going to get to that later when I talk about why there's such a visceral reaction to this. But as for the rest of the movie itself, it is a musical, but it fails abysmally at being a musical. 1 to 2 songs on the soundtrack are decent, and the rest range from boring to shockingly bad. I'm sure a lot of you have seen on TikTok or anywhere else the Sex Change Operation song.
Hello, very nice to meet you. I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see. Men to woman, or woman to men,
Man to woman.
from penis to vagina.
And honestly, that was one of the highlights of the movie for me because it was at least, entertainingly like bad and laughable compared to some of the other parts of the movie, which were a slog to get through. So many of the songs are performed in this stupid talky style, like talk singing, not really actually singing, but delivering dialogue in a kind of sing-songy voice. So it's half-hearted, and I feel like if you're going to do a musical, don't have people talk singing their dialogue. And just finally, the cinematography is very ugly in this movie. There's so many, the colors look so dull and washed out. Musicals are usually super vibrant, and this had none of that. It was just really kind of ugly to look at. So that's it for my personal reaction to the movie. To me, it was just a mid, as they say, movie. It's not something that personally had me reviled, or I was not thinking, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It was just a bad movie, below average. I wouldn't even call it a terrible movie. It was below average, and I'll probably forget about it in 2 weeks, or as soon as this award season is over and all talk about it is done. I don't think it's not going to leave a lasting effect on me. So if it's just a below average movie, why is it getting so much intense hatred online? And there's actually a few reasons for that. So this movie is, of course, about a Mexican trans woman, yet is directed by a cis French man. Jacques Audiard admitted he did not do much research into Mexican culture for this movie, and there's been several other controversial comments by him, by other people that worked on the film, by Carla Sofia Gascon, the main actress who plays Emilia Perez. And, a movie about a Mexican trans woman, it's been poorly received by both the Mexican audience and the trans audience. So, that it's kind of a big failure when the two main demographics that you're trying to represent in your story and tell the story about are completely rejecting this movie. And I just want to say, first off, I am a American white cis male, so I can't sit here and personally say that I was offended by Emilia Perez in the same way that these communities are. These communities have their own feelings on it, and they're completely valid. I can't speak for them personally. I'm just trying to give context as to why the movie is so hated online. I'm not trying to come on here and say this is what the Mexican community believes, or this is what the trans community believes, or if they're right or wrong. I'm just trying to give, again, context to this giant rejection of the movie by these two audiences. So for Mexican critics, they say Emilia Perez perpetuates stereotypes about Mexico, portrays the Spanish language very poorly, and then on the LGBTQ plus side of the argument, they say Emilia Perez perpetuates negative stereotypes about trans people. And after reading, a couple reviews from both of these audiences, I can say these claims are not without substance. I just want to say, first off, I certainly do not believe that you have to be a part of a specific community to make a movie about that community. You don't have to be black to make a movie about black characters. You don't have to be white to make a story about white characters, and you don't have to be Mexican to make a story about Mexican characters. Or you don't have to be part of the LGBTQ plus community to make a story about LGBTQ plus characters. If we set those kind of limits on film, that is a major constriction on art, and would honestly, I believe, lead to less of those types of stories being told, just due to the system in Hollywood and filmmaking in general. But I do think if you are going to tackle subject matter that you do not have a personal connection to, or does not directly affect the community you are involved in, I think you do need to be careful with how you are portraying this community, since you are essentially telling their story from an outside perspective. And I'm not even necessarily saying this has to be a positive portrayal. Not all portrayals have to be positive. That's what makes good characters, is that they're not all good, not all bad. You just can't fall into stereotypes when you are not a part of that community. It just makes it seem disrespectful. And Emilia Perez in Mexico is portrayed as, dirty, and pretty much all the focus on Mexican culture is only on the cartel and the effects of it. Now, obviously, this is an essential part of Emilia Perez's background as part of her character's story. But you can understand why a Mexican audience would feel a little offended when this guy who's not even from Mexico and didn't do any research in Mexico is trying to preach to them about the problems their country is facing. And there's also some controversial lines like, "You smell like my dad," like Diet Coke with ice, lemon, and sweat, mezcal, and guacamole. It feels reductive to portray an entire culture in such a narrow-minded way. When you are not a part of that culture and you're taking stereotypical stuff like tequila and guacamole and using that in your Mexican story. As for the dialect issues, I am an English speaker. I know, a few words in Spanish, so I can't sit here and say that the Mexican accents or pronunciation of Spanish words was something I particularly noticed, but I can see from the reaction of people who do speak Spanish or are from Mexico that obviously they didn't do a very good job of portraying that. And I think if you're going to make your movie in an entirely different language than the one you are familiar with, you need to make sure you're getting it right, especially when this is going to be exposed to an audience that is their language, that is their culture. You need to make sure you're getting this right, or else they're going to know something's up. Also, this is a movie set in Mexico, and apparently only one actor was an actual Mexican, and that's kind of obvious. I don't really need to explain why that's a problem. And then we go to the transgender side of this reaction to Emilia Perez. So in the beginning of the story, Manitas, who is Emilia Perez before she transitions, is portrayed as a ruthless cartel leader. And then post-transition and becoming Emilia, she is, this kind-hearted person. She starts giving back to the people of Mexico, trying to find victims of, cartel activities. Now, on the one hand, this can be seen as a story of redemption and Emilia trying to right her past wrongs. But the issue here is the presentation of Manitas and Emilia as two different people, when really that's not, at least in my viewpoint from what I've seen, that's not how transgender people view themselves. You're not one person transition and become a new person. You are yourself. You just do not feel comfortable in the gender you're born with, so you transition and you are still yourself, yet you're finally, able to feel better in your own skin. Transitioning is not a death. It is not a rebirth. It is exactly what it says, transitioning. You're still who you are. And they even bring this up in the movie, a line that says, "If he is a wolf, she will be a wolf." But then Zoe Saldana's character counters by saying, changing the body changes the soul. And maybe you could argue that this is her as a lawyer trying to lie and just trying to help the person who is her client. But it feels like that's also kind of the thesis of the movie, because Emilia becomes a pretty much different person after her transition. So to trans audiences, this can feel like their struggle is being completely misrepresented and presented in a way that it's not accurate at all to how their community actually operates. It feels as if Emilia's transition to a woman magically resolves her of her crimes that she committed. And it can also be read as, instead of transitioning to become a true version of herself, she's just transitioning to escape her punishment for the crime she committed as a cartel leader. She's merely putting on a facade being a woman, and that is, you can understand why that would be highly offensive to trans people, because this is not them faking something or putting on a mask. It's not, them changing themselves and lying, essentially. They're being their true self. So yeah, I can see why that would make them angry. There are even points in the movie where Amelia describes herself as half man, half woman, and that's not the case with being transgender. When you're serious or attempt to be serious movie discussion on being transgender is getting comparisons to Mrs. Doubtfire, that's not good. That's not something you want for your transgender drama, getting compared to a movie that makes a mockery of, being in drag. And in that movie, Robin Williams' character is presented in the wrong. In this movie, we're meant to see Emilia Perez as sort of a martyr. So, yeah, that is my whole take on the Emilia Perez situation. Do I think it is the worst movie of all time? No. Is it the worst movie to ever be nominated for Best Picture? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I haven't seen every movie nominated for Best Picture. I can tell you it is currently the lowest rated on Letterboxd to ever be nominated for Best Picture. It's obvious this movie is getting strong reactions out of people, and I don't think it's for no reason. And one thing I didn't even mention, outside of how this movie affects communities that it portrays, more so the negative reaction is because it is being portrayed, or at least in the voters' eyes, as being on the same level or above movies that people really do feel passionately in a positive way about, Dune Part 2, The Brutalist, The Substance, even Wicked. And, it feels both disrespectful to those communities that feel upset at their portrayal in Emilia Perez, as well as the filmmakers who put out these amazing movies to only get to receive less recognition than a movie who, depending on who you ask, is either just below average and boring or is super offensive. Now, I'm sure there are people that love Emilia Perez and would have it as like their favorite movie of the year, but I'm just saying it's clear there is a huge negative reaction to this movie, and it is not for no reason. And I do feel if the Academy or whoever, doesn't even have to be just the Oscars, any other award ceremony, gives Best Picture to Emilia Perez, the Oscars and other film award ceremonies, in the grand scheme of things, they don't matter to people like you and me, just the general moviegoer who likes watching these for fun. But to people in the industry, it can feel that is important to them. Some people wait their whole lives for this, and to lose to a movie like this probably does feel like a slap in the face. As well as, like I said, if you are part of those communities, part of the Mexican community or the trans community, it can feel disrespectful to have a movie celebrate like this that is trying to be progressive. I'm sure there are good intentions here. I don't think they were being malicious, but it is a sort of faux progressivism. Just because you're telling the story doesn't mean you're actually being progressive. When it's being portrayed so recklessly, it is not real progressiveness. At least that is my opinion. So yeah, that is all my thoughts on Emilia Perez and the reaction to it online. Have you seen the movie? What are your thoughts on it? Did you like it as much as the award voters seem to, or did you hate it as much as some people do, or are you like me and you just think it's a boring movie at the end of the day? If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm posting movie discussion talk every single week. So if you are into movies, if you like hearing people discuss movies, I hope you'll stick around. Thank you as always for watching. I'll see you next time.